This is my Elgato HD60S Plus, which I've owned for 5 years, and this is my Elgato 4KX, which I've had since November. I'm going to keep this short. I've owned this for 5 years and I have a library of gaming videos to prove it. If you're deciding between the two, I think you should go for the HD60S Plus because the infrastructure and the requirements and demands of the 4KX could be a lot more than you realized, and the actual image quality improvements aren't really that noticeable on YouTube, at least at the time of this recording in January 2025. I will explain my thoughts now, and through that I will also show you the best OBS settings to use whether you do go for the HD60S Plus or the 4KX. The reason I'm saying you're probably better off with the HD60S Plus over the 4KX is that this requires a much faster USB port, it requires a lot more storage to host your gameplay files, and that's even before needing a much faster computer to process and edit 4K video. Now, am I going to keep the 4KX? Yes. Why? Because I bought it on sale. Amazon had a limited time event back in November for Black Friday where there was a limited number of these units that I got at a pretty significant discount. I'm going to sell my HD60S Plus, and then the shortfall and the difference in price there, I'm just going to chalk up to future-proofing myself. So got this on sale, will sell this, therefore the difference between the two won't be that much. So what was my experience with the 4KX? Well, I bought it, admittedly without doing much research. I knew I wanted to capture pure 4K footage because I was very lucky to get a PS5 Pro, but I didn't think about it too much. And the first thing I ran into was realizing that this was going to require USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports, which is 10GB bandwidth, and my old gaming desktop PC did not have. Now, I was going to get a new graphics card and a new PCI card with new USB 4 ports on it, but it kind of just pushed me over the edge to retire that system, and then later on down the line, hopefully sometime this year, I will invest in a new PC system. But I basically spent all my PC money on a PlayStation 5 Pro last Christmas because I was very fortunate to get the opportunity to buy the fanciest 30th anniversary edition model. So I'm now using the Elgato 4KX with my MacBook Pro behind me. It's the M1 Pro model, and that works great because it has USB 4 ports. But then I ran into my second issue because recording with the 4KX requires a lot of storage. I've had to triple the bitrate, and you can imagine how much storage that requires. So for some context, when I do Let's Plays, I actually don't store my Let's Plays. I know some people like to keep them. I don't. As soon as they upload to YouTube, I quality check them, they look good, I delete them off my hard drive. But just the amount of storage you need to record that Let's Play, export it, save it, is so much more with the 4KX than it was with the HD60S Plus. Partially, that might be because I like to do my Let's Plays all in one video. I don't really split them out into parts unless it's a live stream, and therefore I need to capture all that game at once. And if you're capturing multiple games at a time, you can imagine how much storage space that would take up in 4K. These issues are clearly mine. It's not with the actual device itself. If it was poorly made, if it was poor quality, I'd return that. These issues are contextual to me, but the reason why I'm mentioning them is because if you're starting out or you're new to capturing gameplay footage, it might be something to consider and maybe something you never thought about before. Do you actually have the infrastructure on hand to use the 4KX? Is your computer fast enough to process 4K? For example, my MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro chip that I'm currently using with the 4KX, the Apple H264 video encoders aren't fast enough for 4K 60, and so I have to use the CPU with X264 encoding, which does stress the system out and cause the fans to speed up. So that's just something to consider. For example, do you have USB 3.1 or USB 4 ports? Do you have enough storage on hand? Just say you have a 1TB SSD. After you install a few games and you have, say, 500GB left, that's not going to get you very far with the 4KX in terms of capturing gameplay footage, and that's what I really want to mention and bring up. You need serious infrastructure, and you will need external storage, and it has to be fast external storage. On my 4KX, I recorded 8 hours of me playing Cyberpunk 2077 that I'm going to edit down, but 8 hours and 20 minutes of footage came in at 196GB. Now, let's say that was going to be stitched together for a Let's Play. I'm going to need another 196GB, but because the way Final Cut Pro works, it usually makes a dump file, then at the very end makes the proper MP4 file, so it actually duplicates that file, meaning I'd need 392 gigabytes at the minimum left. So that's 588 gigabytes in total, which is a lot of storage. When I record in OBS for 1080p 60, I recommend a bitrate of 20,000 kilobytes a second, and for 4K 60, 50,000 kilobytes a second. This may otherwise be known as 20 megabits and 50 megabits a second, respectively. If I was using the HD60S Plus and therefore recording at 20 megabits a second, that same 8 hours and 20 minutes would only take up 78.4 gigabytes of space. I'd still upscale to 4K, so I'd still need about 470 gigabytes in total, but that can make a difference on you as you manage all your files and data. So what do I recommend exactly step by step? I recommend this. I recommend the Elgato HD60S Plus. This will allow you to pass through 4K 60, so for your PlayStation or your Xbox, on your end, you will get the full quality of 4K at 60 frames a second. And then for recording at 1080p 60 frames a second. And I recommend you capture at 1080p at 60 frames a second, and then in the editing process, upscale to 4K for YouTube. First things first, before you plug your console into your Elgato, you need to disable HDCP in the console settings. Otherwise, you will get a signal, but you will get a black screen, and that is because you need to disable the copy protection beforehand. This means you will not be able to use Netflix until you re-enable that setting, but this is all done to prevent piracy, because obviously this is a capture card. In OBS, set your canvas to 1080p. In the video recording settings, if you're on a Mac, use the Apple dedicated encoders. They can definitely do 1080p, or Nvidia's NVENC, all at a bitrate of 20,000. AMD has a similar encoding option, and I believe that's called AMD ACE. There will be other settings you need to configure, like the preset settings. When I used NVENC, I used P1 or P2 as I had an older computer, but Nvidia does specifically recommend in OBS that you use P6. However, it's all about experimenting. If you do use P6 and you find your recording slow or it's not working, stop, change the setting to P1 or P2, and then try again. I'm always surprised by the comment section in some of my videos where people don't experiment. I totally understand you want a quick answer, but this isn't easy, and that's why quick answers don't exist. You know, this is AV engineering, and that's something that real people are hired to do real jobs and are paid real salaries for. It's high-end equipment, so it's all about experimenting and finding what works for you. My first videos did not look good. They got better over time, so experimenting with settings is everything. Anyway, you plug in your HD60S Plus, install it, and then add it to your OBS scene. I recommend adding the video color correct filters to the capture card to raise the gamma by 0.1. This is because the way YouTube works, everything that is too dark just registers as black and you won't see any detail, so everybody raises the gamma. The trick is not to raise it too much, otherwise gameplay capture will look washed out. You'll have to experiment with what works for you. Also, for my particular model, there was always a greenish tint on the capture. I don't know if it's on all models, so using the same color correct filter, I did a hue shift by +3 to make the colors look as intended. In addition, I think a great way to make the HD60S Plus look even better is by using a sharpening video filter. It makes your image look extra sharp, and the YouTube video encoders as of January 2025 really respond to the contrast that sharpening typically adds to an image. I recommend a value between 0.15 and 0.2. So those are the OBS settings I recommend for the HD60S Plus in the capturing process. You're going to record in 1080p, and I actually advise you edit in 1080p as well until the very end when you're exporting. Now, I use Apple Final Cut Pro. For other programs, you're going to have to Google how to do that on your end. But in Apple Compressor, what I do is I force the project to export at 4K. And it's only at this point in the process do I set it to a bitrate of 50,000 kilobytes a second or 50 megabits. The results, I think, look really good. I don't think it's going to fool Digital Foundry, but my audience who watch my Let's Plays that have commentary on them aren't typically pixel counters. And I think if you compare that footage alongside footage from the 4KX, which is true 4K, can you really tell the difference? I wasn't going to do side-by-side comparisons, however I know if I didn't, there'd probably be a big request for it, so here it is. However, it isn't an equal side-by-side comparison because as you can see with the HD60S Plus, I've added a sharpening filter. But the point of me doing that is actually to more illustrate that even with an older capture card, with a sharpened filter, to a lot of you watching, it probably looks better than the newer 4KX, and that's the point I'm trying to make, which is that even with a third of a bitrate, with the older 1080p capture card, you can get some really great results when you upscale if you know what you're doing, again, using the OBS post-processing. It depends on what you want your gameplay footage to show. If you're trying to be very truthful Digital Foundry style, you need to get the 4KX. But if it's about delivering great image quality, you can do that with the HD60S Plus. The only way I can illustrate that you're actually looking at the 4KX is if I zoom in 4 times, because you can make out the details on the calendar, whereas you can't with the HD60S Plus. But that's how much into detail you have to go before you can actually see noticeable differences. One last thing you can do with the HD60S Plus is record in OBS of 4K. It's going to use a lot more processing power and a lot more storage, but you can do it. You set the canvas to 4K, also known as 3840 by 2160, and increase the bitrate to 50,000 kilobytes a second. You're basically upscaling much earlier in the process, which I don't really recommend because I think editing 1080p footage is so much easier than editing 4K. But what's the benefit of using OBS on this capture device to do that 4K rather than 1080p? Well, what if you want to live stream in 4K? Yes, using the HD60S Plus, if you do your upscaling in OBS, that would allow you to YouTube live stream in 4K. Twitch doesn't support 4K, YouTube does, and I've used this very capture card to do 4K live streaming of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 throughout the years. With my current 4KX, I'm doing Elden Ring right now, and you can go over there and watch those streams and decide if the quality difference between the upscaled HD60S Plus and the 4KX is really worth it to you. I got a new streaming microphone, so if you're going to notice anything, it'll probably just be the sound and that I sound better now in my new videos. So that's my thoughts on why, if you're starting out in YouTube gaming and doing Let's Plays, why I think you probably should save some money and go for the HD60S Plus over the 4KX. Again, there's nothing wrong with the 4KX. If it was bad, I wouldn't have gotten it. I would have returned it. I mean, I had to pay for all of this. This isn't sponsored. But recording and editing in 4K just uses a lot of resources, so this is my heads up to make sure you have the infrastructure on hand to handle it, particularly if you're using an older desktop PC system or even a laptop. You can use the 4KX to record in 1080p, obviously, but again, why are you paying extra if you're not going to use the full function of the capture card? One last thing I want to point out though about the HD60S Plus, and this is a warning, and that's probably a reason why I'm keeping the 4KX, is the future proofing. The 4KX allows pass-through of 144Hz monitors, and it can actually record at 144, so if YouTube ever enables that in the future, I'm off to the races. And if I ever get a new monitor with a high refresh rate, the 4KX will allow that, whereas the HD60S Plus is capped at 60Hz at 4K. Another thing I read online that I cannot test on my end, but you will have to do some research if it applies to you, is apparently you cannot do pass-through of a 2K video source. So if you're doing a pass-through, I think, of like a PC with a 2K, resolution, a 2560 by 1440 or 1440p monitor, from what I understand, for some reason it doesn't work with HD60S Plus. We'll only do 4K or 1080p. That's from what I read, that 2K doesn't work, but you need to do research on your end because I cannot confirm that. I don't have the equipment to test that currently. If you are going to get the 4KX, I'm going to tell you the settings I'm currently using right now. So again, I'm using the MacBook Pro M1 Pro chip, and again, those Apple video encoders don't actually work at 4K 60. So I'm using X264 CPU encoding, and I'm going for the very fast setting. I'm also using a filter called Film, and of course I'm using a bitrate of 50,000. With the HD60S Plus, you saw me applying a load of filters like sharpening. I'm not currently doing that just because currently I'm live streaming games that use the full advantage of the PS5 Pro. So I kind of want those videos to be as unfiltered as possible so viewers can see and observe, the full beauty of the PS5 Pro and what the quality looks like. But in the future, as I do other Let's Play videos, I probably will also add a sharpening filter, but that takes away from the truth of the image. The sharpening filter is an editorial decision I recommend you make because I do think the image looks better, but it's you making a creative choice to the video capture. That isn't what the game developers have, done to the footage themselves. It's something you're doing. So just because I'm kind of advertising my Elden Ring Let's Play as, PS5 Pro capture, I just want to be a little bit more truthful currently right now with my live streams. But I think in the future, I definitely will be adding a sharpening filter. If you found the video helpful, do let me know and drop a comment down below. Are you going to get the HD60S Plus used? I don't think it's discontinued, so you probably have to buy used, but I know they do currently sell a 1080p version. Or are you going to get the 4KX? Do let me know, and I hope you found these tips helpful and helped you decide with the comparisons. Obviously subscribe and stay tuned for future videos. You can also check out my unboxing of the fancy PS5 Pro if you're interested in watching a very long video. I haven't made YouTube videos in quite a while, and that was my first video back, and so that was not edited properly. Like, that video went on way too long. I don't think anyone wants to watch 15 minutes of me opening a PlayStation and playing some games on it, but if you do watch that video. I hope you're keeping safe and well, and I will see you all. Have a happy new year, 2025. That'd be a good one. Bye, everybody.